Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to another post-game edition of 5 on the Floor. I'm your host, Greg Sylvander. Tonight's floor plan with me, Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket, Brady Hawk. We're still working through his Twitter situation, but hopefully Brady Hawk 305 shall live on. But he is with us as well. We are going to dissect Miami's rout of the Washington Wizards. 118-98 was the final. We're going to get into all of the pertinent information. Bam had a big game. There's some stuff to talk about in the defensive end, how the rotation was expanded and Spoelstra went a little deeper than maybe we expected. So we got stuff to get to. Before that, let's shout out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. You want to definitely join there for all of the Miami Heat conversation that you could ever ask for. There's also channels to talk all the other sports as well. So you can really sub out of all your other social media and go right on Off the Floor. It can be your hub for everything. $2.99 a month, $3.99 on your Apple device. Link right here in the description. Check out Off the Floor. That is our Discord server. Most heat anywhere. That's what we say about it because it's true. So as we get into the first segment, let's just immediately kick this off. We're going to talk about the player of the game. Comes to us from A Aggressive Insurance. Let's get to that first segment because that is going to kick off the show on the right note.
And now it's time for the A Aggressive Insurance Player of the Night, sponsored by our friend Lynette. You can find her at insurancebylynette.com. That's with 2 N's and 2 T's, insurancebylynette.com. If you need car insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, or any other type of insurance, she's the person to go to. Based in Lauderhill, she services the entire Tri-County area here in South Florida, and she will make sure to get you the best deal. She'll probably talk to you about the Heat while you're at it. Reach out to her, insurancebylynette.com. And now, the player of the game.
It was a Bam game. Finally, here it comes for Bam Adebayo, and boy, did he need it. It felt like there were games where he was struggling, frustrated. Tonight was not one of them. 12 of 24 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3, 32 points in 30 minutes, 14 rebounds, a steal, a block, 2 assists. He was everywhere, Brady. What did you see? I had kind of it was apparent that what they were him early in this game to try to get him going, and that started to work. What else did you see from Bam tonight that really turned around? It was as aggressive as we've seen him, and as efficient as we've seen him so far this season.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, the first play, they set a cross screen for him to kind of get it in isolation. He turns it into kind of like a post hook, which was pretty much the first play they ran almost all of last season. And it was why Bam had so much success. We used to talk about it last year. It was like, if you get him going early in the game, he gets in a flow and everything kind of spirals from there offensively. And it felt like early in this season, it was a lot on the guards. It was such a heavily, it was just so important to get them going that it felt like the Bam was kind of on the back burner. So it was good to see them kind of put him at the front again after they all acknowledged it after the last game. But I'll say, for one, he just looked confident again as an offensive player. Like, it was no doubt. There was no kind of looking around for a handoff. If he was open, he was going to flow into a shot. And the second part to that is something I've been talking about a lot recently, that it's like he doesn't have to worry about the new offense or not shooting a certain shot or like this being a bad shot to the metrics. It's like, Bam, you have to play your game. That's for the other guys. That's for the role guys. That's for the guard room. That's for the backcourt. That's for Terry and Tyler maximizing their game, getting more threes up. But you need to take mid ranges. That's not a bad shot for you. And I just thought that they just let him operate a little bit more inside the arc to start the game, kind of in that elbow extended, right inside the wing, that inside the corner, that baseline. Like they let him operate in those spots that he's used to. And then what you saw happen was once he got that going, he expanded to the 3-point line and he got the threes going. I just never was a fan. And that's why I didn't think that the preseason role for him was sustainable, because I just didn't think it made sense for him to start games standing out at the 3-point line. Like that'll never get him in a flow. He's somebody that needs to react. That like the 3-point shooting needs to come based off the way defense are playing him, and then he can make them pay, and then he can bounce off of that. So I think that's just that kind of the key in this game is he played the inside, he played the mid-range, and then you saw him expand out a little bit later, which I think the 3-point shooting is purely a confidence thing for him. Like we saw that in the Olympics, that it's like if he's cooking inside, he's going to shoot that thing outside confidently. So you're going to see once he gets it going, though, it opens up everybody else, as we know, that then you could start working the driving kicks and get back to certain other offense. And it also helps leaning in that direction when it felt like to start the game, Terry didn't really have it going efficiently. So they had to lean away from the guard room. It felt like a little bit. But this was a big game for him. I mean, to have this type of performance, 32-12, in a time when he really needed it, when he has like the microscope on him, and it didn't feel like we've had that on him in quite some time. That I felt like this was important. He needed this type of game to like spring into these future ones, because look, there's a matchup coming up on Monday where he's going to be playing a guy in Sabonis that he seems to be putting conversations with constantly. That he needed this game before that to kind of propel him to kind of just get this off his shoulders a little bit.
Definitely. That's a matchup that they're going to basically go home for a tough game and then out on the road for an extended trip. So that's not an easy game to come back to. But tonight they get the victory. 65-44 was the rebounding edge, Alex. And a lot of that had to do with Bam's 14-5 on the offensive glass. But I also thought that the 9 rebounds they got from Terry and from Tyler were big. Your thoughts on the backcourt, the shot distribution, the way that Bam kind of led tonight, and the backcourt was, Tyler was 5 of 9. I mean, maybe I guess we expect him to shoot a little bit more than that. Terry was not efficient, 4 of 13, but 13 sounds about right there. What were your thoughts on how the backcourt played with Bam kind of as the primary focus tonight from a offensive perspective?
Well, first of all, I'm lagging a little bit, so sorry if it's been a trend here lately that I'm gonna have to solve. But just giving you a disclaimer there, so get ready for that. But no, I agree with what Brady was talking about here. Was like, and you called it, by the way, Leif. You called it on Discord before the game that they were going to feature Bam more, and it was clear from the beginning of the game that was for them, right? I think it's just getting back to that. Setting up those plays for him, like Brady mentioned, the cross screens. It's just such a pet Bam action over these last couple of regular seasons when they get him going with the self-created shots down there in the kind of in the paint and the short mid range, and that's where he likes to get going. I completely agree that for him that shot is important, right? It's a different situation from Tyler and Terry, who you want shooting more threes, and of course getting more paint touches with the added spacing from Bam and Jimmy being able to spot up and whatever, like all that stuff we've been talking about. But I just think like Bam getting back to his game, right? Not only as a, self-created guy, but also, kept getting the threes up tonight and got him up with confidence, right? And I think just getting back to that, right? It's a breakout game for him in the sense of like breaking out of this little mini slump he's been in. Just like, you need right for these types of games to just a slump buster type of game. I think that's what he had here, where it's not that he was missing a lot of shots, even though he has been, right, for his standards. He just wasn't taking the same type of shots that we'd seen from him over these past couple of regular seasons. Like him putting up 24 field goal attempts is pretty insane, because that's what Terry and Tyler combined for, right? And that's not been the case for most of this regular season so far. It's been a Tyler and Terry dominated offense. So I think getting, Bam just kind of back into the flow of things here offensively is going to be extremely helpful for their offense. But I wonder if it stays to this level, right, where they're running that many versus a good team, Sacramento. But
Yeah, and another tough part of that is, the Washington Wizards may just be a team that cures all and makes you feel good for a night. You're right in that we'll see when they play Sacramento what this looks like. Let's get to our next segment. We want to shout out Real Estate Shop in our Defending the House segment. Let's get to that one now.
And now it's time for our Defending the House segment, sponsored by our friends over at the Real Estate Shop. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. That's with 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com, or at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. This is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin. They help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties with a proven on-market strategy. The Real Estate Shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame because Amanda and Javier have a deep understanding of the local market. So check them out. Again, it's at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram, realestateshopfl.com, or give them a call at 954-268-9812. And now, who defended the house?
And when we talk about defending the house, the statistic that jumps out to me as I box score watch is 7 of 35. The Wizards shot from 3. That's 20%. I think some of that maybe you can chalk up to the Wizards just not shooting well. But Brady, did you see anything that they did specifically to run Washington off the line? Interested just because this wasn't a night where they were heavy in any kind of zone or anything like that. What you saw that just, and also, I mean, let's be real. They only shot 41.8% Washington as well. So it's not like they shot well overall either. What did you see from the Heat defense, or was this just a night where the Washington Wizards were your opponent and so you feel good about that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think it's probably more so the Wizards' part. Like, I just look at the way, like, the shots they take, and it's almost like it's just such a relief on a defense. Like, it didn't feel like they had to get in their bag defensively, or Spo had to, like, funnel through coverages. They just stayed in their base pretty much the whole night. There was a whole bunch of drop. They didn't even go to a whole ton of switching across the board. Like, it was pretty simple. But the Wizards like to play fast. So I think the credit to give Miami was there was a lot of really good defensive transition plays. And just that's not something we're used to from last year. It was kind of one of their problems last year. So them kind of getting back in that realm of just kind of getting back on defense and doing that. The other number that stuck out to me a little bit was the rebounding, which ties into the defense, and it's 65 to 44. Like that's just huge. Like if they can get like on the boards like that. And there's a specific player I wanted to mention because I was looking at this number earlier. Jaime Jaquez has been rebounding like at a really high level this season. He's averaging like close to 8 rebounds a game, and I know it's small sample size here, but we're at 5 games at least. He's averaging close to 8 rebounds in a game, and his last 3 games have been 10 rebounds, 8 rebounds, and 9 rebounds. Like they talk about rebounding by committee and all that stuff, and I remember Tyler used to do a lot of this early on, and he still does. Like he rebounds above his height, but like Jaime being able to crash like that and just be active, and it's not always defensive. Like he's active on the offensive boards, just with tip-ins and finding his way there. That I think like that's important. Like if we're gonna sit here and talk about the big man spot behind Bam and Thomas Bryant, what he's providing, or who's going to slot in for him and all this stuff. Like ultimately, it's going to have to be a committee thing. And just the fact that you have a wing player like that's going to be getting major minutes to this team that could do that. I just think that kind of stands out. But in general, I just think the defense was more so Miami just kind of staying packed in and letting Washington kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. Like the couple of those Jordan Poole threes, it was like Miami's like, okay, like we'll live with that. Like you could take those all night and we'll just pack the paint and we'll get some rebounds. So I think it was a fine defensive game. They didn't have to turn them over a ton either. I think they turned them over 11 times. So just nothing crazy. They just played their game defensively and they just Greg, I'll say this. It almost feels like against bad teams, they have this mindset that we're just going to outscore you now. And I'm not used to this with this team because they used to be in dog fights with these bad
Yeah.
teams. Like it would be clutch games. And the reason for why it would be clutch games, it wasn't just because they're even with these bad teams. It was because they play in this in the mud defensive style and that fit these bad teams. Like you're playing down to them. You're more talented than these teams. You have to be the offensive firepower team that leans into this. And it feels like they're finally doing that. Like they're leaning into the offense. They're playing faster in these games. And I know we're going to talk about the rotation, so I won't go on and on about that right now. But like you're seeing certain tweaks they're making in a rotation against teams like Charlotte, Detroit, Washington, just shows you that they're totally just trying to outshoot you, outscore you. And I really like that game plan coming from Miami.
Yeah, we're going to get into the rotation here in a minute because that was the thing that I think jumped out at all of us. It'll be what we x-ray in terms of the play of the day with mobile C-arm and staffing. But before we get to that, Alec Burks, let's talk about him specifically, Alex, because he killed it. He was 5 of 7 from 3. I mean, like you're finding a guy that is filling a role that they desperately need in this specific game. And then also just this decision to not play Haywood Highsmith, I think is really interesting. But since Burks has been a guy that you said we were going to see a lot of, and it looks like it's trending in that direction, I am interested to hear what you thought of Burks' night overall, beyond the shooting, just his floor game in general, and just what they got from him, from a contribution perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned today on Playback. Of course, check us out there at playback.tv/5RSN, doing every game there. Had a fun time with this game, obviously very unserious game. And I just think part of it was what was looking at that, right? Was like, wait, this is one of those things that you can take away from it in the sense of like, there is no set rotation with the back kind of couple of spots there. And it's changed in every game. And of course, today was a little bit different with Duncan not available. So that obviously factors into some of these guys playing here. But, you've seen different combinations being thrown out there. It's kind of all the guys that we had these questions about heading into the season as far as like who gets those last couple of spots. And, Love and Bryant like that, like the backup 5. And of course, where that conversation was a part of it as well. But that hasn't even been really what's been up in question because Bryant has just gotten those minutes. He's apparently earned the hell out of those minutes. So there's no question about who's going to get that when Love is out.
9 rebounds for Thomas Bryant.
Yeah, whether he fans like it or not, whether I like it or not, he's the guy there. But outside of that, like what they've been doing with Burks, with Haywood, with Drew, and now with Larsson, and today you got to see Josh Richardson play as well. Like those are the guys who I feel like he's gonna have to pick and choose from when they're healthy. And he's already said this season, he plans to use his depth, and he's done that. He's stuck to his word. I wonder how much of it is just like he's not quite sure what the best like combinations are there from that mix of guys, just because they're all like viable candidates, right? Even if you want to throw Drew in there, like I know how people feel about him, but he's certainly earned a spot in the conversation. Even though I don't think he like that wouldn't be where I went personally myself. He definitely deserves to be in that conversation. So seeing Burks there, my property value on Alec Burks and Keikos has been skyrocketing. It just like when they signed him at the minimum, it just felt like a guy who they were going to use, especially with like the Jay Rich stuff. And look, he's back now, so that's going to affect the Burke stuff as well. And you've got Larsson like really showing out on. It looks like a two-way guy immediately with an NBA body, so he's making his case too, even if you think he's lower on the ladder, right? The metaphorical ladder here. Like there's a lot of guys making their case here. Burks can really shoot, as we've seen, like doesn't miss from corners. And like you mentioned, Leif, he just is a kind of natural mover out there. Like when he's like the way that he was, like him and Larsson had like a weird, like effective 2-man game going there. I think like in the second half of the game, they were just kind of playing off of each other, like Larsson hammer screen for Burks, and then like there was like a little kind of give and go action there, and they were just moving like two guys who just, were just passing and moving well, and I think just making the right reads, right? And I think Burks can do that, and putting him in a role like this where he's not doing too much like ball handling and he's just kind of playing a role, I think is making him look even better because it's just kind of showing off some of his strengths. So I still think it hasn't been decided like who these last two spots are going to go to. But as Bo said, like this is what kind of this time is for. I think right now Burks has a really, like he's got a strong candidacy going because of the way he's played. Jay Rich obviously has like the experience. They want the defense, but speaking of the defense, today was the first one, even with all the mixing up, the first game I believe where they don't play at least one of Drew or Haywood. They did not play either one of them. So maybe it's because it's the Wizards, right? You're not exactly afraid of their offense, even though I know they had like a high offensive rating going into this game. Maybe this is one where like, oh, we need a defensive specialist out there, right? So maybe it's just a matchup thing for all I know. But that was interesting to me where they just went with Burks. But I mean, but even then, like I'm saying that as I think about it, they went with Burks, but then they went with Jay Rich and Larsson, who Larsson seems like a guy who I think we all like feel like can be a positive defender, sooner than later compared to most rookies because of his NBA body and the way that he plays and kind of plays through contact. And then Jay Rich has obviously been a positive defender in the past in his NBA career. So I feel like he's just cycling through the options right now.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where they land because there were guys that I didn't expect to see tonight that we ended up seeing, Brady. Let's get to the X-ray play of the day. That's where we'll deep dive on kind of the different rotational shifts as well as Jay Rich being back. So let's get to that segment.
And now it's time for the X-ray of the play of the day, brought to us by our friends over at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Nelson and his team will bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you. If you work in a hospital or a medical office, get a consultation today at c-armandstaffing.com or give them a call at 561-891-9620. Their fleet of trucks at your service. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services, 561-891-9620. And now, the X-ray of the play of the day.
So we're not honing in on a specific play, but if you look at the rotation, Josh was back. We got 16 minutes. I didn't think he looked particularly great, but I also understand that he's rusty. I don't think that Josh Richardson is the answer for this rotation. I think he'll be on the outside looking in long term. Brady, your thoughts on Jay Rich being back, and then just mixing in here, some of the Larsson minutes that we saw. I feel like the Kalel Ware stuff there at the end doesn't really count, but Larsson getting a look, I thought was interesting for this. And then I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Nico, and just he had good moments, but didn't shoot well. Your thoughts on Nico, and then obviously some of the shifts that happened coming off the bench with Spoelstra.
So I actually start with Nico because I think we should probably do an entire episode on him because we do so many different episodes on specific guys. And I feel like he's just such an interesting one because he's put in this position where he's forced. I don't want to say forced because I think it makes sense for him, but to be a connector for this starting lineup. And I've liked a lot of the stuff that he's done, specifically in the fast break and in transition. Like I think he fits that role well. But I think what you're seeing is that he's kind of forced into this spot offensively with this lineup where it is strictly on spot up shooting. And that's ultimately where he's going to find his role in this league. Like he's going to have to hit that three ball at a 38 to 40% clip. And it just hasn't been there, it feels like, to start this season consistently. But I wonder, I think when you're talking about rotations and finding different things out, and especially without Kevin Love being with the group right now and you're rolling with Thomas Bryant, I almost wish they'd find a way to like work him into a different lineup as well. Like I know he gets the initial first stint and he sits the rest of the half. Like I understand that they've done that forever, but I feel like he's the type of guy where like I wouldn't mind seeing him grouped back in with the Jaime and Jimmy lineup or just something along those lines where I just think that would help him offensively to get into some type of rhythm, especially on this type of game. But obviously, bigger picture here, the rotation is interesting because I cannot tell you their thought process on a lot of this. I just think they're in a position where when they play a team like New York, they went with Drew Smith. They're going to go with the defensive guys because they know that's the style they have to play in those games. But when they play Washington, when they play Charlotte, And when they play Detroit, they're going to lean offense and they're going to play Burks and they're going to play. And Pelle is kind of a two-way guy, so it's hard to really tell what their thought process there. I just think they wanted to get a look at him in general. And the fact that Duncan wasn't playing was even easier for that. Like, I don't think it was Burks for Duncan. I think it was more so Pelle for Duncan. And they were just trying to see what they had there and let him get his initial run. But it's hard to tell because Thomas Bryant is kind of given at this stage, as long as people may not want to hear it. But without Kevin Love, he's a given in that kind of that bench rotation. Jaime's a given. Duncan, when he's healthy and when he's back on the team, is a given. And then from there is when it gets a little dicey. Jay Rich, it's going to be kind of up in the air with what that's going to be. I'm still trying to find what his role will be specifically, unless he's like comes out and he's just a point of attack defensive killer. But I think with Miami, I still feel like Drew Smith and him are kind of in a battle there. If there is certain games, like who are they going to go with? I think that's kind of up in the air. When I look at who else, like Pelle, I don't know if they're totally going to go in that direction. Burks is the one, but I just think about, are they going to play Burks and Duncan off the bench? And I probably a lot of nights think they probably could, just because they're staggering and they're playing different lineups. And at some point, look, they've mixed things up like nightly, but at some point you just have to just go through the flows of the season and ride with the hot hand. Alec Burks is 8 for 11 from 3 this season with Miami. How are you not going to play the guy that's 8 for 11 from 3?
It's like Wayne Ellington.
You just can't. Like,
especially struggles.
What's it again?
While Duncan is struggling.
Oh, correct.
Exactly.
Correct. That's kind of the big key here. So that's why I'm kind of wondering, can they play together when they're can they find a way to work them in together? Does the Burks playing allow you to loop Duncan back in with Bam? Like, these are my questions of how they can kind of treat a rotation in general. But my big takeaway here really is that I think Burks is kind of the fun one to watch here. Like, he's kind of the X factor end of the rotation guy to watch, just because with the style that they're playing, with the new offense, and with them just wanting to outscore teams, it feels like right now, he's kind of the easy option right now. Like, he's kind of the guy you want to lean, and he's not like a guy that's getting absolutely attacked on defense. Like, he's not going to be a ball stopper that you're putting at the top of your press, but he's also not getting picked on yet. Like, we're not seeing anything like that. So I think he's the guy you're probably going to see get run for a lot of this time. And let me just finish here, because the name I didn't say yet was Haywood Highsmith. And I think none of us could have guessed that we'd be having this conversation where I'd be getting him to him as like the 13th name that I'm naming. But it feels like Spo's getting to him as like the 13th. Like, they put in Kel'el Ware and Drew Smith and these guys at the end of the game with 2 minutes left, and Haywood trotted in with them. And it's like, I just didn't think we'd be here right now. Like, especially with the fact that they have like guys like Kevin Love not with the team. So I feel like this was a game that he would play. But like I said, I really do think they lean offense against these teams. But the Haywood thing's probably another guy we probably have to do an episode on, because I didn't expect this specifically. Like, I understand it. My take on it, if you were to get like my full opinion on what's going on here, I think they just don't like the idea of him off the bench with Thomas Bryant. And it's not like they're picking Thomas Bryant over Haywood. I don't want to make it sound like that. But when Kevin Love comes back, Kevin Love is going to be the backup big, and Haywood fits in perfectly. When you're going to have Duncan, Jaime, Love, and Haywood, and you play Jimmy with that lineup, and that's probably going to be the 9-man rotation when they're fully healthy, when Love comes back. So I think Haywood will be back in the fold. Like, I'm not too worried at it, but it is just interesting because we've always called him this plug-and-play guy where he just fits in whenever guys went down, and it just feels like he's kind of like the odd man out right now this season.
And also, honestly, if you look at their cap sheet, they're paying him to be more than a 2-minute-a-game player this year. Like, they're paying him rotation contributor money, and they were hoping to get actual, like, more than what they're paying for essentially from Haywood Highsmith. And so it is an interesting dynamic that they haven't deployed him more. I'm interested, Alex, if they do it against Keegan Murray and DeMar DeRozan against Sacramento coming up. But I mean, they kind of have been agnostic to lineups or matchups, it seems like Spoelstra's he is trying a bunch of different stuff to see what sticks. Do you think that we see anything different? Drew Smith back in the rotation, more Highsmith, anything like that for the Sacramento game before we close?
Could be Drew for all we know, versus all those guys. But I thought you made a good point there as far as Haywood being a good matchup for the Kings here, right? With all the kind of the scoring talent, the box, even if he gets to guard Herter at some point, like he can help with those guys, and Murray as well. I forgot to mention him like you did. It's a lot of talent there offensively, so I think it's a good game for Haywood. He can guard up or down. I think he's, I in general like think of him. I think more highly of him than I do Drew, even though I know Drew can defend. And I think he's probably one of those guys where if I had my way about it, I would probably have like Highsmith and Burks is the 9th and 10th. If you're telling me like Larsson is not going to be in the mix because it's too early or whatever the reasoning is, right? Like if he wants to go with vets, I would probably go Burks and Highsmith for those last two spots. Like you're never really too small, other than of course when you play Terry and Tyler together. But outside of that, like I think Burks and Highsmith, like you've got enough size there, positional size, of course, not like bigs or anything, but just to fill those last two spots, and you've got like clear cut roles there. Like we know that Haywood is going to stick to his role, and like we've been talking about, Burks has been doing his job there. Other than that, I think like Larsson would be my guy who I would like to see, just because we've been talking about he projects to be a two-way guy, has some shooting talent, is pretty good player, so I just think he fits in, and I think that's going to eventually get him playing time. Especially when some of these guys are out. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but as we saw tonight with no Duncan, they played him. They played him over Drew and Haywood, and that's not something that we would have said after kind of the way that it was trending, right, earlier in preseason and earlier this season. The other thing I wanted to mention was like tonight, going to this Bam-centered offense, it felt like a throwback to some of what we've seen the past couple of regular seasons, and then it also reflects that in the shot profile numbers on cleaning the glass, where they took like, I want to say a 28th percentile amount of attempts at the rim. And I think it was in the 80s for their shots outside of 4 feet, otherwise known as the mid-range, as far as clean glass, how they classify it. And then a pretty low percentile as far as threes taken. So that's kind of what the problem was before, right? Is that the shot profile wasn't balanced out. And I wonder if some of that is just, you're playing, you're kind of not on point. You're playing against this team that you had a big lead on in this game, and the habits went kind of out the door. You're not playing exactly the way as a better team, right? You could say that. But I think a big chunk of it was going back to that offense around Bam, and I think the question is, you maintain the proper balance of everybody getting their shots and everybody getting the right amount of shots. Because I do want Bam taking those middies when they're there. And maybe I don't think of him as a first option, but I do think that's got to be there. That's got to be in the shot profile. But like tonight, they took like 35 shots that were twos outside of the paint, and they shot like 25% on those. And most of them, like the overwhelming majority, were classified as short mid-range. They shot 25% on those. So I wonder here, like how much of going back to that Bam-centered offense, how much that gets in the way of the stuff you've been trying to do and have done pretty successfully up to this point, as far as like sticking to that, rim shots at the rim and shots from three mentality. So that's just kind of, I think, something to watch for. And also, by the way, Brady made that comment earlier as far as like they can score against bad teams. And I agree. It's nice that they can do that now and just kind of take care of business. Like they're 3-0 versus these bad teams. That's very, like, I think none of us expected that. They're going to win all 3 of these games early on against these bad teams. It feels like they usually drop 1 or 2 of these. So that's good. My qualm is against the good teams, right? It feels like they have like this weird identity of no identity. Right, we're like, yeah, we can score against bad teams, but then against the good teams, you're not as good on defense as you were before. So that identity isn't as strong. Their defense isn't as consistent and tough and physical, maybe as it was in other years. And then at the same time, the offense just can't play to that level that it does versus bad teams, versus some of these good teams who have positional size. So I think those are kind of the things that that we should be monitoring here going forward.
Especially on this West Coast trip. It is not going to be easy. There are some winnable games, I think more winnable than we expect them to be. There's some teams Is Denver along the way there? That usually is a bad matchup, and they're in a kind of in a weird space as well. We'll see where they go. We got Sacramento first. We'll have you covered for that. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Alex and Brady. The Heat win 118-98 over the Wizards, and it is 3-2 now. So we'll see who they get back. If Duncan Robinson maybe can get back for the game against Sacramento. We haven't heard any updates on Kevin Love. We'll continue to monitor those situations. If any information comes up, it'll be on Off the Floor. Thank you for joining us. Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.